This is GARIS, Masculist, MGTOW flyers. That is 2-3 page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 430, part 2, entitled Masculist Strategy Against Feminist Gender Political Bias. Carrying straight on. I have several times experienced the flash of fear that passes over the faces of feminists the first time they hear the term masculist. They think that masculists will be violent against women. That's true, verbally speaking. Masculists will lash out at fluffies and fluffy feminists, crushing them intellectually and verbally violently. Masculists say that, quote, when men become collectively angry at women, God help women. I consider it highly likely that women evolved to be afraid of male violence, since in the distant past, women who challenged men verbally, sexually, physically, risked being killed by much stronger and more violent men. This is probably why women today are such sexual cowards, who are afraid to simply walk up to some man they sexually fancy and proposition him. This would have been a life-threatening risk for them in the distant past, since there were no police forces in those days. If a woman got on the nerves too much of the men in her group, then she could be easily killed. So women learned to attract the attention of men they wanted to have sex with if they were to have babies, which is the primary biological function of women, in order to create and raise the next generation. So women use indirect methods to attract men, with visual signals such as baubles, fake-up, rings, etc., that catch the eye of men, so that eye contact can be made and a personal interest established between the man and the woman. Thus, it is likely that women have an evolved fear of very angry men, and for good reason. In the distant past, if a woman did not avoid the considerable wrath of a very angry male, it could have cost her her life. This fear that women have of very angry males can be used to great effect by very angry masculists who lash out at female manslavery, at the far greater gender crimes that women commit against men than vice versa, thus scaring these fluffy feminist hypocrites into men fearing the gender laws. Otherwise, in the limit, as these fluffy feminist hypocrites indirectly wipe out whole populations, masculist soldiers will simply shoot them, so that humanity survives. Feminists may counter this approach by using the law, but the masculists will counter this feminist argument by pointing out that the ultimate backup of the law is brute male force, that is, exercised by male cops. But when these male cops themselves go masculists, then women are fucked. Thus, the above is the masculist verbally violent approach that will certainly gain attention from the media, who will report on it and give the masculist leaders a means to spread masculist ideas to the masses, the unthinking millions, who will be influenced by masculist ideas, especially the men. The other main masculist approach is to appeal to the intelligence and reasonable-mindedness of female thinkers with high IQs, who are capable of seeing quickly the case of the masculists and agree that women should vote with men for the men fairing of the gender laws, for example, reforming the divorce courts so that fathers are not deprived of their kids with a 90% probability, that alimony is thrown out, that custody of kids is made joint by default, that the owner of the house gets to keep it, etc., that the para is legislated, so that men are not manslaved for decades by a pill-lying female who lies to her boyfriend/husband that she's taking the pill, but in reality really wants to get pregnant, then uses the law to force him to pay for a kid that he doesn't want, thus manslaving him for decades, a massive gender crime that women commit against men in their millions. Passing the para will force women to grow up, to FIP up, to become financially responsible FIPs as adults, which is a prospect that terrifies fluffies who like the idea of being able to parasite off a man. Highly intelligent, open-minded women will be the first to absorb masculist ideas, since they are capable of absorbing any idea quickly and easily due to their superior intelligence. I expect that the first female masculists, and hence bi-conscious feminists, that is, who have had both their feminist and their masculist consciousnesses raised, by learning how men oppress women and by learning how women oppress men, close brackets, will be formed from university elite women who will then go on to write their bi-conscious opinions about gender politics and influence the slightly lesser intelligent women, and so on down the line. Once these highly intelligent bi-conscious feminists start writing their articles in the media for the female masses will be educated into masculist ideas and feel threatened that if they don't FIP up, then they will pay a horrible price of not getting a man. Hence they will suffer greatly by being loveless, sexless, babyless, and spat at by an ever masculisting society. So which of these two broad masculist strategies will prove to be more effective? I'm not sure yet, so I suggest that both be applied. Look at the historical equivalent in the case of the suffragettes, who after decades of quietly trying to persuade male politicians to give women the vote, Emily Pankhurst and her daughters decided on a terrorist approach and achieved huge publicity, especially when one of their members ran in front of the King's horse and became the movement's first martyr. In my own case, I will probably do both. If the audience is a group of very smart female academics who are capable of listening to reason, literally, then I will take a reasoned approach, spelling out how women oppress men, calling for the men-fairing of the gender laws, the reform of the divorce courts, the passage of the para, the establishment of parliamentary gender equality committees that are half feminist and half masculist, addressing feminist and masculist issues equally, etc. In today's world, April 2021, if you mention to anyone the term gender politics, they will automatically think of feminism, since to most people the very notion of men's lib, of masculism, seems like an oxymoron, since the whole society has been brainwashed for 60 years that gender oppression is a one-way street. Masculists know from first-hand experience that it is not. Masculists know that gender oppression is a two-way street, and that in fact women oppress men far worse than vice versa, so that when incredulous, monoconscious feminazis are first confronted by very angry, hateful masculists, these feminazis will attack back vociferously, which will call for a volcanic counter-explosion by the masculists, causing fear in the eyes of the monoconscious feminazis. In quiet academic forums which discuss gender political issues, masculist professors like myself can raise masculist issues in a quiet, calm, reasoned manner. But these monoconscious feminists need to know that if they turn into vindictive monoconscious feminazi bigots and attack men, then I and like-minded masculists will switch on our vicious side and bite these fucking feminazis' heads off by gender politically haranguing them out of the room. I feel there is value in taking a carrot and stick approach to persuading monoconscious feminists to become bi-conscious, so that they realise, when looking back in time when they were monoconscious, that they were truly insensitive towards men's gender plight, simply because they were ignorant of how women oppress men. They had not had their masculist consciousness raised because they had not yet been exposed to the tirades of the masculists in their audiences, who blew their fucking heads off with masculist rage, masculist ideas, masculist rhetoric, forcing these monoconscious feminists to broaden their gender politics or be forced out of the room by a vociferous harangue from the masculists. Masculists want feminists to become bi-conscious, otherwise these feminists will be justifiably labelled MFBs, monoconscious, feminazi bigots. As masculist ideas spread throughout the world, large numbers of women will be influenced by them, converting themselves into being bi-conscious feminists, who then see their monoconscious sisters as bigots, as dumber, as less gender politically informed, hence as inferior, to be looked down on. Thus I see two broad approaches that masculists can take towards feminist, monoconscious, gender political bias, that is, seeing gender oppression as a one-way street, which are A. The verbally violent, vicious attack on feminazis, blowing them out of the room. And the other, B. The quiet, reasoned, academic approach to the highly intelligent, open-minded feminists. And as an example of the latter, Betty Friedan, the mother of the second wave of feminism, due to her book, The Feminine Mystique, published in 1963, which promoted female careerism, saying that upper middle class women were bored being housewives and wanted to be more challenged by taking up the traditional male role of being careerists, earning money, and thus gaining financial independence and hence greater female freedom, instead of parasiting off the labour and money of a man, manslaving him. I spoke to Friedan at the United Nations Mid-Decade for Women in Copenhagen in 1980. Friedan was a genius with an IQ of 180. She could see clearly that gender politics was a two-way street, that feminism was only half the story, and that once women had become careerists in a big way, men could then afford to work less, be freer, and not be such manslaves to women, to fluffy, manslaving parasites. So there are such women out there, especially the smartest of them. They see that there is a need for a masculist movement to free men from manslavery to fluffy, manslaving parasites. In reality, I would be highly surprised if both approaches by the masculists, in brackets, that is the carrot, that is the mild, persuasive approach, and the stick, that is the verbally aggressive approach, are not used. I will probably use both, and soon, since in the year that I write this, the COVID vaccines are being injected into billions of people. So soon, there will again be public fora in which masculists will have the opportunity to air their masculist ideas in public and start converting millions of people interested in gender politics from being monoconscious to being bi-conscious, thus adopting much fairer gender political attitudes towards men and giving up their traditional feminist gender political bias, that is, of seeing gender oppression as a one-way street, that is, by men against women, whereas in fact the reverse is more the case. Women oppress men far worse, since millions of women manslave men for decades, a hugely larger gender crime that needs to be annihilated. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Author of the book Masculism, Men's Rebellion Against Being Manslaves to Women, an e-textbook of 430 plus masculist flyers for men's studies courses. Freely downloadable in Microsoft Word format from my website.